Hey all. So I wanted to provide an update on the raycasting project. So for the past week, off and on, I've been working on the editor side. And when I first started this project, I was trying to keep my focus on the engine and ultimately making a game. And so I wasn't spending too many cycles on the game editor. So some of the code was a bit sloppy. It was missing some functionalities. But the reason why I wasn't giving it a whole lot of attention early on is because just from past experience, when you're working on a large project, you can get fatigued. And a project can really mean multiple projects. So like in this case, there's the editor, there's the raycasting engine, there would be the game that you make out of these tools, and it's very easy to get burnt out. So I try to keep my focus on where my main interest was, but I just had to go back at this point and do some refactoring and some functionality. So like when I first created the ability to save a level, then I jump back into the engine, right? And I'm testing the engine and I'm tweaking the engine, and I forget that, or not forget, but I procrastinate on the fact that I need to have a level load. So I finally went back and added the ability to load a level back in. So I thought for this video, I would show a demo on how I stitch these levels together, and just a little bit more under the hood of on how this is working. So in my main folder here for my project, I have a tools folder, and then here's my game editor. And this is a Python GUI. So there's different panes here. There's an inspector pane here. So when you select sprites, you'll see metadata. A level pane here for drawing in, and if it's very large or larger than the window, it automatically adds scroll bars for you. This is the texture pane, and this is the tool pane. So all these textures are loaded in from a default folder, in my CD folder, inside of this graphics folder, because they're not converted yet. I have a textures folder, and here are all the textures. So the engine doesn't load everything in. The engine will only load what it needs, but the editor loads everything. And you'll notice that all these textures are rotated, and that's because I'm reading them in this way, but I'm drawing them vertically. The sprites, I'm not doing that. The sprites are just drawn normally upright. But for the wall textures, because I'm drawing those in slivers, let's say array hits, the middle of this bookcase, all I need to do is just get to that row, and then I can use the cell engine very easily to render that row vertically. And so that's why everything is at 90 degrees. So with that said, I'll create a couple levels and stitch them together. So I'll do, say, 9 by 9. Doesn't have to be big for this demo. And maybe clear that out. And then maybe do something like that, and maybe add some windows. I think these are windows. Um, Add them here. Maybe add a couple sprites. Maybe put the player here. Have them facing towards that door. This I'm still not too happy with. I haven't refactored it yet, but this is basically 64 degrees, which in the engine will end up translating to, south or looking straight down. So it'll be 0, 64, 192, or sorry, 128, 192, and then 256 would be a full circle. And I can take any wall and turn that into an exit or a door. So I will turn this into an exit. And this is what really triggers the logic to go from, one level to the next. And I will save that as level 1. So this is some old data of mine here. So I wrote out 133 bytes. I could compress this more if I really wanted to, but generally I don't like to optimize where I feel I probably don't need to. I mean, I have some graphics that are larger than that, and I've created some larger levels, and it's still not that bad. So if I have to refactor this and optimize and compress things, I will, but right now I just don't see a need to do it, and I would rather keep things simple than overcomplicate things that I probably don't need to overcomplicate. And I'm not really the best person when it comes to optimizing anyway, but I feel like right now it's okay to, you know, the way it's working now is probably okay. Um, so I'll create level 2 real quick and maybe pick this here. Maybe have the player start yeah, here, have them facing up, dress this up a bit, maybe put a barrel here. And let's save this as level 2. I won't create an exit. So here we got 127 bytes written. So this is all matching up. When I first created this, the save feature, I painstakingly had to verify, with a pretty complex scene, make sure that everything was being saved accordingly and that the number of bytes written were accurate and representative of the level. So that was fun. And then this is exciting. So I just finished this, but I can finally load stuff back in. So and then here you can see 133 bytes were written and 133 bytes were read for level 1. So everything is matching up. Okay. And so you can see here in the editor, let me make the text a little bigger. You can see that everything is being written out as a byte. So, map XY, our player map XY angle is 3 bytes, 2 bytes for the map width and height, 2 bytes for the exit, and so on. So now on the engine side, so now we're leaving Python land and we're going into C. I have this load level data function, and it takes in an integer for the level number, and then it uses that to concatenate and create the path to the file. So when the engine first starts, the level counter is at 0. And then I have another function called load next level. So when you hit an exit, I call load next level, and that does some things like unloads the prior resources, increments that level counter, then calls this. So that's how everything gets stitched together. And the music is also working similar. So if we go into the CD folder, we look at the levels. So here we got level 1 and 2. And if we look at my music folder, I got song 1 and 2. So these would be playing for the respective level numbers. So I just try to think of ways to simplify these data associations so that I could just keep the logic minimal. And since I'm writing out the bytes, I know exactly what I need to read in and where and what order. So see here, you can see the first 3 bytes are the player position and viewing angle and the map width and height, the exit. I allocate my space for the map. The map is made up of a bunch of map nodes, and this is just a type that I created so that I can associate different attributes to a location. And you can see some of those here. Like by default, for empty space, there's just no texture. It's not solid. But if it's not an empty space, then there's a texture. I turn my solid flag on. If it's a door, there's 1 extra byte to read for the key. So the keys just work as a collection of flags that I add together. So every time you pick up a key, it gets concatenated there, and I just do some simple bitwise operations to check if you should be able to open the door or not. Doors don't have to have key. If there's no key, this is just 0. Um, Here I'll have a lookup table for the doors so that later on I can just quickly reference things. Here I loaded my texture, so it only loads in the textures that it needs. And the sprites actually don't take up a lot of memory. Well, not data wise. The actual sprite structure and its data that I built up does. But from a level perspective, it's really just 3 bytes if it's just a inanimate object. If it's a like a baddie, then there's 1 extra byte for the viewing angle. And you can see here that I create my own sprite cells during this phase. Oh, I'm already here. So here I have create cell, and I am not. I'm passing in this little trick here so that the library does not uh, the code will not create or allocate the memory for pixel data for me because I'm going to be pointing the source pointer to different frames of animations that I load. So depending on the sprite type, depending on if it's being animated, depending on the frame, the state of the sprite, I have other logic that is updating the source pointer. So I don't need this extra space to be created for me. And you can see there are different flags that you set. It's actually not too bad to create your own cell. And then these pre-0, pre-1 flags so that you specify, is the cell coded or uncoded? Does that basically have a palette, the bits per pixel, and then the dimensions? And so I load all that in. And then every time the load next level logic hits, everything that was loaded prior is destroyed and freed up. Uh, so with that said, we can run our test here. So I'll build this. And here's what we just created a few minutes ago. Something that I need to update is I haven't made it so where you slide on walls yet. So if you hit a wall, you just get stuck. So I gotta work on that. And then this is what we marked as our exit. So now the engine looks for level 2. Yeah, so pretty straightforward on how that's all linked together. So what I will do now is I need to go back to the engine and there's some things that I want to optimize. I'm not very good at optimizing things but there's just some areas that just off the top of my head, I made a mental note like, this could be better, and I'll come back to it. So there are some things that I want to clean up. I need to make some transition states. So like when you die, what should that look like? When you reach the end of a level, what should that look like? Update the engine so you can slide on walls because that's kind of a game breaker if you keep getting stuck in narrow corridors. But I'm getting pretty close to being able to put something together. I I recently acquired this digital camera that's pretty old, and I spent not much on it at all. I mean, it's pretty funny to think that once upon a time those things were hundreds of dollars. But the reason why I wanted an old digital camera is because I wanted to experiment taking digitized graphics with lower resolution. So this digital camera that I bought, I think it takes photos in you have two options. Like, option one is 320 by 240, which sounds perfect for this. And then the fancy option is 640 by 480. But I wanted to experiment using lower resolution camera and see if maybe the textures that I create and the sprites that I create maybe end up looking a little more normal for this type of technology. So that's going to be interesting. But I'll be posting up some more videos. I'm getting pretty close to being able to start focusing more on actual game elements rather than just spending all my time working on a tool and working on the engine. But it's been fun, and thank you all for watching. I appreciate your interest in this, and I'll keep you posted on the updates. So, thanks all.